for who I am. I swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth. So help me God, across my heart and tonight. These are the words we use to get out of situations. Then I wonder why we don't mean what we say. Then I remember the terrible truth about the truth. If you stand for the truth, always stand up. If you stand for the truth, always stand alone. If you stand for the truth, you will always stand alone. Stand for the truth, you will always stand alone. If you stand for the truth, you will always stand alone. And if you stand for the truth, you will always stand alone. My holy book tells us that truth will set us free. But in this world,
All right, let me see a special greetings and welcome to all of you tuned in to Civic Vibes at this time. My name is Loftus Jura, hosting this evening's program. Alvin Thomas is here. He will be doing battle, as it were, with me right here this afternoon, like every other afternoon. Let me say as well a special good afternoon to Paula Celestine, wherever you are this time. Hope you're having a very good evening. Folks, it is the Civic Vibes team. Let me say a special good evening to you guys as well, listening and locked in at this time. Thank you for your hard work each and every time in the background. Folks, it is Sunday the 26th day of February 2023, and welcome to another sport right here from the 6 o'clock hour. We'll at a touch late this evening, 9 minutes already past the hour, 6 o'clock, but we are here and we are ready to go. Sometimes technical issues, you know, when you're dealing with technology, something sometimes happen at times you don't really want it to. But we are there and we are ready to go. Those of you in Dominica, the region, or even further afield, a special good evening, some of you a special good morning to you. It's always a pleasure to be in your listening and hearing audience these days. This evening, folks, we're going to have another packed and interesting program for you right here on Civic Vibes. Let me say first off the bat, we have an all-important topic that we're going to discuss, and that all-important topic is the importance of NGOs, that is non-governmental organizations, to any democratic country. And our special guest this evening, none other than former UN Ambassador, Mr. Crispin Gregoire, and also Chief Executive Officer of Crispin Gregoire and Associates. He is here already and ready to go to basically expound on that all-important topic for us this evening. So in just a while, we're going to welcome him, open his mic, and then he can say his hi, hello to you guys out there. But before that, though, let me move across to my brother, Alvin Thomas, who is always there with me these days. Alvin, a special good evening to you.
Good evening, Brother Lofty. Good evening to you and our many folks who have already tuned in and waiting for the start of the program. Yes, it's indeed a pleasure to be back again another Sunday Civic Vibe program, and to say a special good evening as well to my friend Crispin Gregoire. Yeah, Crispin and I go way back, man. It's even too long to recall, way back. So it's a pleasure to see Crispin here, and I'm sure we'll be having a very engaging discussion. Lofty, just before we dive into the program, I just want on behalf of Civic Vibes to extend condolences to the families and friends of Henry Wilson. We know Henry Wilson passed. He passed a couple of days ago, I think 2 or 3 days ago he passed. And we know Mr. Wilson was a very prominent businessman in Dominica. worked in the public service. I recall I worked with him many, many years ago, many moons away, at the time when he was at the Treasury. And then when he retired, he started his own business. His wife was a nurse for many, many years. And many of us know the contribution that Wilson has played in Dominica. His brother, Felix Wilson, we know, very involved in sports development, was the principal of the Dominica Grammar School. So on behalf of Civic Vibes, and I'm sure on your behalf, Lofty, we want to extend condolences to our dear brother family, NC Wilson.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, my brother Alvin Thomas, for doing that on behalf of Civic Vibes. I too want to extend our sympathies and condolences to the Wilson's family at this time. Brother Felix Wilson was my principal then at grammar school for some days.
Wow.
So yes, you're right on cue. The second segment of the program, ladies and gentlemen, we will be dealing with the important role, the very important role that any functioning electoral commission have to play in terms of bringing about and also maintaining free and fair elections in any country. But we're talking about Dominica, so we'll streamline it to Dominica this time around. So in the second segment of the program, the Electoral Commission will be squarely and surely under the microscope this evening here. Alvin and I, maybe if Greg will have some time, he can, touch and stay some time with us. That is if he has the time, that is. So folks, let me just touch some of our, well, before I touch some of those of you who are here, let me move across and say a special good afternoon again to our special invited guest, former UN ambassador, I said before, and also CEO and president of Crispin Gregoire and Associates. Mr. Gregoire, good evening to you, sir, in a very special way, and welcome.
Good evening, Lofty, and thank you for inviting me to be a guest on your program this evening, Civic Vibes. And I also want to shout out my friend Alvin Thomas. Let me also take the opportunity to convey my condolences to the Wilson family on the passing of their son. And I hope the great Father grants them the strength to bear his loss. So thank you, Lofty, again, and I hope it will be an interesting evening and a contribution here.
Yes, indeed. Well, Crispin, when the news broke on social media that you're coming on, a number of persons reached out and said, wow, I will be tuned in. A lady in, she lives in the Goodwill area. Her name is, what's her name now? Wow, slip me, but I'll get it before the night is over. She told me, wow, Kristen is my cousin from Grand Bay, Munguan Bay. So she's listening, and she, Miss Kazimi, that is Kazimi, Annette Kazimi, Anita Kazimi, sorry, Anita Kazimi.
Anita Kazimi, okay.
Yes, yes.
Well, welcome, and welcome to all your viewers and listeners.
Yes, man. All right, folks, before we move across to Crispin for his opening remarks on the topic at hand, let me move across here and watch the board, the live board that is. Clarolyn Warrington, you're there. Good evening to you. Watson Duvini, good evening to you as well. Ivinia Joseph, Bernard Aline, Veronica Pascal, Dave Bertrand, good evening to you, my bro, Veronica Pascal. All of you here. Gertrude Deschamps, good evening to you on the live feed here. Everlasting Peter, you're there as well. John Joseph, you're there. Good evening to all of you folks. Judith Cochran, that is my folk from Cochran there. Good evening to you. Eliza Louise Gomes, you are there as well. Kate Alexander, you are also there. Carol Bruni, you are also there. So we want to touch you in a very special way. Lauren Lestrade, good evening to you. And talking about Lauren, let me say good evening to a very special lady as well, senior in the Pottersville area by the name of Lauren. Lauren Seraphine, good evening to you, my dear. Maury Jules, Betsy in the Bath Estate area, that is Auntie Betsy, good evening to you. Brian Francis, you're there. Peter Carbon, you're there. Marvella Defoe, Maury Jules, Olivia Esprit, David C. Joseph, good evening to you as well. Carol Fontaine, good evening to you. Merlin Alfred Macpherson, you are there as well. Mali Ostri, and the list goes on and on and on. So folks, it's always a pleasure to have you here each and every time. My friend out there somewhere, good evening to you. That is Frances Vidal. Good evening to you in a very special way. Folks, that is the time we have to move across in just a while to start the conversation. But before we do, let me just give the telephone numbers that you can call in to the program if you want to, that is based on what you have been hearing. The numbers to call, they are 245-2396. I'll be putting that in the live feed in just a while. 245-2396 and also 615-9470. Let me repeat, 615-9470. Also, we are also live on YouTube as we speak. So those of you who want to have the liberty of, relaxing and watching us on your big screen TV on YouTube, you have that avenue as well on YouTube. So folks, it is 18 past the hour of 6 o'clock. And yes, let us move across to Mr. Crispin Gregoire as we start the conversation here this evening. Mr. Gregoire, the topic at hand is one I know that is very dear to your heart in terms of the importance of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, to any country. I know we'll be streaming it down to Dominica as it pertains to the importance of these NGOs. First and foremost, Mr. Gregoire, can you describe in a nutshell what is an NGO to the persons listening at this time?
But Lofty, let me just jump in quickly, just a very quick. Before Crispin come on that, let our listeners know that we are doing that program as well in observation of World NGO Day, which is observed on the 27th, which is tomorrow, I think it is. Every year, it's a UN designated observation.
Yes.
And every year since 2014, I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, they have recognized the importance of NGO. Mm-hmm. And as such, we observe World NGO Day every year since then on the 27th of February. And the United Nations have indicated that the universal concept of World NGO Day is to celebrate, commemorate, and collaborate the various NGOs around the world and the people behind them that contribute to society all year round. So I just wanted to plug that in before Crispin jump in, so that the listeners will appreciate and understand the basis for the conversation we're having today.
Thank you very much, my brother Alvin. That is why you are there. You see, two hands make light work. Thank you.
Right. Well, Alvin, thanks for that. And I should mention that I did serve for 4 years on the UN NGO committee. So that is the body that admits NGOs into what's called consultative status with the UN. And there are right now over 3,000 NGOs worldwide that are connected to the UN and can attend UN meetings. As far as what an NGO is, an NGO, which stands for non-governmental organization, is an entity that is, first of all, voluntary in scope, because people come together to address a particular problem. And so there are NGOs of all different missions. Some of them might be focused on one specific mission, whether it's like eradicating, let's say, polio, or addressing problems of democracy. There are NGOs that have multi-focus, so they focus on more than one thing. But typically NGOs are started by what I call visionaries, visionary people who bring other people together to try to address a particular problem in society. And in different countries, there's a legal process which they have to go through to become legally constituted, or to register with the state. But I want to say in a larger context that NGOs are a subset of what I call civil society organizations. Because when I say civil society, what I mean is the entire range of organizations and groups that are independent of the state. They're voluntary, at least to some extent, they're self-governing and self-reliant in some ways. They raise their own money. And this includes NGOs, this includes independent mass media, that includes think tanks, in some cases universities, cooperatives, and social and religious groups. So you get a sense that civil society is broad, and NGOs is one of the groupings in the larger civil society. I would say that since the end of the Cold War in 1991, there has been a greater focus in the world on civil society and NGOs. Of course, we've had NGOs operating going back since after World War II, but we really see significant growth of the NGOs in the 90s, in the 80s and the 90s. And in the specific case of Dominica, we've always had NGOs. I can point out to some of them. Some of them go way back. If you think of, and I want to qualify it by saying that in our context of Dominica, we've had what we call international NGOs like the Red Cross and the Save the Children, and in later times we had Christian Children's Fund, but we've also had Dominican NGOs, and that's a development that happened more in the 1970s, 1980s. If just to point out a Dominican NGO that we had Dominica Conservation Association. That was a Dominican NGO with a Dominican board. So was a very active organization in the 80s called the Small Projects Assistance Team, SPAT. We had the Dominica Farmers Union, the Dominican Association of People Who Are Physically Challenged. I think that's their name now, but I hope to be corrected on what the current name is. It used to be called, back in the 80s, the Dominica Association of Disabled People, but they've changed their name to
I think they are now called, they amended that name to Dominicans with Different Abilities.
Okay.
Yeah, Dominicans with Different Abilities.
And then you have the Credit Union League. It's another Dominican NGO. You have the National Development Foundation of Dominica. So these are some of the NGOs. There was one of them that I was involved with in the 80s, actually in the 90s. The Dominica, it was called Development Alternatives International, and so just we saw that, first of all, the international NGOs that came to Dominica, and as some of them transformed into Dominican entities, like the Canadian Save the Children became Dominica Save the Children Fund, Dominic Save, and of course we still have the Red Cross. They've continued to be an international NGO. So now I would say that these NGOs, which tend to be like full-time organizations, have a lot to contribute to a country's development. And it is recognized now that every country's development depends on three sectors. So you have the state sector, the government sector, you have the private sector, which is the business sector, and then you have the what we call the third sector, or the voluntary sector, or in a larger sense, the civil society sector, which is the voluntary organizations that contribute to country's development. In Dominica, we have, it has been said that the NGO sector has declined a bit in the last 30 years. And to some extent, that's a valid observation. And one will ask, why has there been such decline? Well, one of the things that happened in the 90s was that most of the organizations who were doing development work, they faced a challenge, and that is there was a shift from the Caribbean to places like the African continent and Eastern Europe by the donor organizations that funded these organizations. So that a lot of organizations lost their funding base and had real difficulty getting alternate funding to survive, and consequently a number of them went out of business. So we get to the end of the 1990s and into the year 2000, and we probably have fewer organizations operating, but there's still a number of organizations functioning. And I must say that to do that full-time work, it needs to be financially supported. And until these organizations address that question of how they will survive financially, it makes it difficult to be self-sustaining over a long time.
Yeah, thanks, Crispin, for basically putting down, as it were, the foundation, the cornerstone aspects of what really is an NGO. You touch on a number of areas that NGOs, were prevalent in Dominica. And so as we continue on into the conversation, then persons out there will know much more about, that all-important topic that we're discussing this evening, and how they too can be part and parcel of an NGO if they are not part of any. Alvin, any further comments, any thoughts based on what you heard?
Yeah, well, I too subscribe to the comments that Crispin has already made on the matter. But I think as just comes to mind, and he mentioned some of those NGOs that have been in existence in Dominica for the last couple of years. We have, as he said, the Dominica National Council of Women. We have the National Youth Council of Dominica. We have, I think there is still a Dominica Organic Agriculture Movement. It's not as active. You have the Dominica Council of the Aging, Inc. You have the Dominica Association of Persons with a Disability, well, I think, as we said, it's called differently now. I believe we still have Save the Children Fund and the National Development Foundation of Dominica. I mean, all of those, while it is true, as he said, part of the sustainability of these organizations has to do with funding, but I think more fundamental than that, these are persons that have certain things in common, and as such, come together to represent their interest. Because, as it were, government, which is also one of the pillars that he mentioned, are there to provide the governance part and what the people need. But civil society, under which the NGO falls under that other broader group that we refer to as civil society. And herein lies the question of the role of civil society in any development, in any matters as it relates to governance of the country. So while it's true, I agree that, and in terms of a funding, that may pose certain challenges for them, I think it is absolutely necessary that those agencies, or these NGOs rather, exist for the purpose which they mean. I mean, take for example, the Dominica Council on the Aging. Say you were to get rid of them or they just disintegrate. I mean, who's going to really represent the interests of the aging population, or the people who are aging, we consider aging? Think of the National Council of Women. and the various issues that women have, that women may want to articulate to the government on their behalf. Think of the National Development Foundation. I mean, this organization has been there for over 20, almost 30 years, and the extent to which they have contributed towards the development of the country and the people. So I think the point has to be made, and it has to be understood that NGOs serve a very useful purpose in the democratization of any country, and as such must be encouraged. It is saddening to have heard not too long ago, I don't want to misquote the Prime Minister, but he made reference to the fact that he was annoyed at the fact that some NGOs were either challenging the government and what he would do and not do as it relates to NGOs. And that, to my mind, is very dangerous because, as I said, they form part of civil society. And as such, in any true democracy, you need that group of persons as part of our development moving forward.
Yes,
well,
thank you. Yes, and
yeah.
yes, Crispin, go ahead.
Well,
Thank you, Alvin.
It's interesting you raised that point, but first of all, I want to thank you for mentioning some of these NGOs that I did not mention, and those are very active ones, like the Committee on Aging and the National Council of Women, and there are many others, and let's not forget the unions. The unions form part of civil society. That's the representation of workers, very important. And that representation of workers goes back to the 1940s when the trade union movement started in Dominica. So that's also part of civil society. I want to say that we've always had a tension between some NGOs and government, and it is because NGOs, as bona fide organizations representing certain interests, they do sometimes critical of government policy, and consequently, governments get very unhappy when certain NGOs say some things. This is not unique to Dominica. This is a problem all over the world where governments get very, very nervous and upset with certain organizations. And they've gone even to the extent in some countries to make it difficult for these organizations to get funding from outside, and make it very difficult for them to undertake certain activities. And the whole notion of free association and peaceful assembly is under attack. So I think my view is that that's not a good approach for any government to take, to want to clamp down on NGOs, but rather I think the better approach is to have a dialogue. They should be invited in to discuss their particular view. I think when NGOs speak, they do raise important policy options. So they should make sure that they're not in coalition, on a coalition course with NGOs.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for putting that down, Crispin. Let me ask you a very important question now, Crispin, as we're moving on here. In Dominica, the situation is, for example, if some persons come together and decide they want to form an NGO to serve whatever interest in Dominica, a minister of government would have to sign off, as it were, to get that NGO the status that they need in the country from a national standpoint. There are hindrances to that, because I know, for example, certain persons, certain groups came together and really wanted that status. But because of who that government minister think these people are, then those documents were just, on their table. and not signed up till today. Give us your perspective on that, please.
Yeah. Well, again, that's an unfortunate policy. I think that really there needs to be a better process of how NGOs are given legal status. I think sometimes the criteria is just too subjective, and it's in the hands of a minister. In our case now is the Minister of National Security, and if that NGO has people on the board, or the board that is being proposed, who might be critics of the government, then they're not going to get status. And I think that's really unacceptable. I think that NGOs should be from all stripes, all political views should contend. It doesn't matter whether they're from the opposition party or they're from independents and they're not allowed status. I think that there really should be some kind of a commission. We need to reach that stage where there's a commission that reviews the application of NGOs and recommends them for status, as opposed to it being left to the people in the government, especially a minister, to decide your fate. So what will happen is that, you see, NGOs are voluntary efforts of people who want to make a commitment to assist a particular mission. And it doesn't matter what their political stripe is. I think we really have to grow as a country in that realm. First of all, having NGOs helps to break the partisan nature of society, especially having people only from the government or the ruling, because government will change. So it really, when it comes to civil society, there shouldn't be a split in terms of who gets status, who gets legal status, and who doesn't. And so Lofty, I think that this is a development that started actually in the 80s when the Freedom Party was in power, and I'm seeing it repeated, and it's unfortunate that, because there are a lot of people who don't support the current government or the ruling party, if you will, who want to do good for society, who want to contribute to society, social good, and there should not be barriers to them making that meaningful contribution. Without having civil society and the open participation of people to contribute, a country will only become split along party lines, and that's unfortunate. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that now, that a lot of things, a lot of people who could contribute to social development ostracized, and that's just rather unfortunate.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thanks, Crispin, for expounding on that here.
Yeah.
In terms of what we are discussing, just before Alvin comes in terms of what we're discussing, Brother Gregoire, I am hearing you speaking and giving the explanations of why NGOs, how NGOs come about. Now, I also heard you mention about persons giving up their time freely in terms of voluntarism, which is all good. And all that to me tells me that there has to be a certain democratic atmosphere in any country for an NGO to sort of thrive. Do you think, Crispin, that, for example, in places that are despotic in nature with very tyrannical rulers, these NGOs can thrive like they thrive in democratic countries?
Well, even in countries that are not considered democratic, there are NGOs. It's just that there's the space for them to operate is being clamped down increasingly. And in the more autocratic countries, they simply close you down as an NGO, you know, and shut you up. And in some cases, they imprison people who were leaders of NGOs simply because they may criticize the government. But I think that I wanted to raise, as you brought that question up, I think that there are 3 ways that NGOs can help to establish and strengthen democracy.
Yes.
And that can take them into conflict with the ruling status quo, right? First of all, they establish awareness of and respect for the right of individuals to exercise freedom of expression, assembly, and association. And these things are crucial for participatory democracy. Those 3 things, and if I can mention to the listening audience, is that in our Constitution, those 3 things are highlighted very, very well. So that is freedom of expression and freedom of assembly and freedom of association. Those 3 things are sort of the cornerstones of our democracy. And in some cases, governments get very touchy when people begin to raise those things. But those things are enshrined in the Constitution, and that is why NGOs, and particularly those that are focused on rights and governance and democracy, they try to educate the public about these rights that are in the Constitution. Secondly, NGOs are working to ensure that there is a level playing field upon which candidates for elective office can compete, and that the entire elections process is free and fair, right? And the third key thing about strengthening democracy that NGOs are doing, they're working to build and strengthen the rule of just laws and responsive and accountable institutions of government, so that the rights of individuals are protected regardless of which persons or parties may be in office at a given time. So they are really, in a sense, and this subset of NGOs that are dealing with democracy and rights are very focused on these 3 things. And I'll tell you, those things bring them into conflict with governments. I mean, if you take, for example, that whole focus that our country is now in terms of electoral reform, outside the political parties, it is NGOs who have been in the forefront of pushing for a more accountable democratic process as far as elections are concerned, and that has brought them into conflict with the government. I mean, imagine the government unleashing the police and they use tear gas on the one NGO, the Concerned Citizens Movement, who'd been in the vanguard of Lofty. You at the time you were the leader of that movement.
Yes, indeed. And just to let the people know, Crispin, you were right there with us, and you took your share of tear gas as well, on that day.
I did. I'd seen tear gas being used in many countries, but I never knew that I was going to face it myself. That to me was a very misguided and unjust stance of the police. Because when you see what has happened to our police, they've allowed themselves, and by deliberate policy, to become sort of the armed wing of a party. The police is not supposed to play that role. They're not supposed to be. I just didn't see the reason why they used tear gas that day. With the meeting was almost at an end, and it's at the 15 minutes to the end of the meeting. That's when they used tear gas. For what reason? And it was very dangerous thing they did. It was right next to a gas station. We could have had a catastrophe that day. But I have to say that did not deter that particular NGO, the Concerned Citizen Movement. They continued to educate and agitate. And today, I would say that there's been a sort of a success, because the number one issue in Dominica today politically is electoral reform. And I have to commend the Concerned Citizens Movement for the work that they've done at great peril to their own personal safety. But they've done it, and it tells you that is that kind of commitment of people from civil society who want to see things change. The other organization who also, to me, was very effective in that realm was the Dominica Conservation Association, when Afi Martin was the executive director. They undertook a lot of environmental preservation efforts and educated the population about this thing. So I think that what we've seen, the Concerned Citizens Movement was actually a new dispensation as far as the NGO sector, and that is, for the first time, we saw an NGO that emerged that wasn't afraid to challenge the injustice as far as electoral governance and the direction it has gone. Because the political parties on the opposition side, although they were championing that, they did not show the kind of militancy that civil society organizations were prepared to show. And what was also significant is on that particular question of electoral reform and democratic process, a coalition of NGOs emerged and came together and put forward an electoral reform agenda, which I thought was quite significant. We didn't need an external commissioner to come and tell us what is the electoral reform process. It was actually done.
Yeah.
The civil society organizations of Dominica came together and put a platform, put out a very comprehensive framework for electoral reform, so that it showed that we, the Dominican people ourselves, we could do it. But the government was not willing to listen. And the Electoral Commission, which really, frankly, I know that you all are going to talk about them later on, but the Electoral Commission is really doing a disservice to Dominica. And let me just say, not the Electoral Commission as a complete membership, because there's a split in the Electoral Commission. And as long as we have that split there, where they cannot have a consensus, it will not go anywhere. And I think that the electoral reform must itself reform the Electoral Commission. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Crispin, for a mouthful there indeed. Let me just give guys an update. Crispin touched on a case where a number of us were tear-gassed, standing up for rights in Dominica, just before Alvin coming. Just an update. That case, Brother Crispin, it is in the court. We have challenged the police, and that case is in the court. So, we know how things drag in the judiciary system in Dominica. But I can give the people out there the guarantee that we are still ventilating just why in the legal system that unnecessary use of tear gas was used on the people, and the state must answer as to that unsavory action in 2018.
Right. But
Yeah.
and I should also mention in tandem with that, I'm pleased to hear that, Lofty. I was not aware that you all had taken legal action.
Yes.
But that behavior of the police did reach the Human Rights Council in Geneva. The UN Human Rights Council was very much aware of this. I was quite surprised in their report what they said. They said quite a few things about that our democratization process and all of the bottlenecks to reform, and we saw it play out in December of 2022 when another election was called and reform had not been done.
Yeah. Alvin, any further thoughts as we're moving on? It's 6:57,
Yeah, well,
6:53 already.
Yeah,
sorry.
I mean,
Yes.
I think Crispin touched on several key areas in his deliberation, but and what I noted, and I'm glad he raised it because that was my response when I was about to come in. He mentioned the fact that NGOs or the formation of an NGO sometimes rests with the discretions of a minister, whether he or she wishes to approve or otherwise. And I think, and I've said so several times on this program, you know, change is not easy. It has never been easy. And it sometimes involves the loss of lives. Crispin can attest to that. Throughout the world, people have fought. The fact that we're able to vote today and walk freely is because certain persons before us, our ancestors, our Bala and our folks who say, hey, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to fight, even if it means I prefer die fighting for my freedom than to die a slave. So change is not easy, okay? And a lot of those things I will continue to say rest upon the people. That document they call the Constitution, which we have, a written constitution. As it were, England doesn't have a written constitution, but they gave us one. They do not have one. America has a written constitution, but England doesn't have a written constitution. And they have a certain way of conforming. And if the politicians or whoever don't do what they do, they will take action. But we have a written contract, the people. And I keep saying our constitution is that of we, whereas the people of Dominica, which means we the people, that's ours. And Section 11 of the Constitution deals specifically with protection of freedom of assembly and association. And that section reads, except with his own consent. That's how it started, you know, except with his or her own consent. I must consent, me, the people. A person shall, you don't say may, you know, a person shall not be hindered in the enjoyment of his freedom of assembly and association. That is to say, his right to assemble freely and associate with other persons, and in particular, to form or belong to trade unions or other associations for the protection of his or her, I'm reading her into there, but it says his interest. So if the disabled people or the conservationists or the youth or the what you call it, feel, you know what, we got to form something to protect our interests, our rights as farmers or as whatever it is. They have that right under the Constitution, and no minister can and should stop that. And they can challenge that under the Constitution. They can challenge it. But I believe what has happened over the time, over the years, Lofty, is that things have gotten so out of whack in Dominica that a lot of us take things for granted. A lot of us do not challenge stuff. a lot of us do not go that extra and say, hey, I think I have a right. Some injustice has been done. And they just accept the status quo. They just roll back and play dead. And that, I think, is what we have to change, that mindset. So, he mentioned the Dominica Conservation Association. Lofty, you're in Dominica. You've driven all over the island. Look at the kind of degradation that is taking place with the folks, the foreigners who are mining our pumice and our sand. Look what's happening to our rivers. Look what's happening to the environment. Now you're telling me that if persons decide to come together to safeguard and protect that the minister say, no, you cannot do it. It's time we get that fighting spirit in us. So my question to Crispin is, moving forward, because we have identified some of the good work of the NGOs, what they've done in the past and what the challenges are. But in moving forward, how do we overcome that? What are the strategies that we need to employ? Because we can't just roll back and play dead and say, well, the minister decided he's not doing it, so therefore he's not doing it, and therefore that's the end of the story. You have rightly pointed out the work of these folks in the Electoral Commission work and what they've done. So how do we move forward? Because this is the million-dollar question. We have to keep fighting. We can't play dead. And what are some of the strategies you think that organizations and individuals need to adopt in order to keep the fight going?
Right. Well, I think that dialogue is very important. We must not be afraid to dialogue with the government, even when they might not be forthcoming. It's important to throw the ball in their court. You have to meet with them. You have to have the dialogue with them. And if they are intransigent, then you take your case outside the country. You take it to the international community. Dominica is a member of the United Nations.
Exactly.
Dominica is a member of the OAS. Dominica is the member of, for those two, we have the Human Rights Council, where, so you have to reach out to these institutions to make your case. I can say that in the whole electoral reform agenda and leading up to 2019, representation was made to the Organization of American States. The Secretary General was willing to meet with Dominicans on that question. And Dominica's case was discussed at the General Assembly of the OAS. So there are these options that we have when the space is closed or they don't want to allow space. Pressure can be brought from these institutions. I mean, at the Human Rights Council, Vince Henderson came to present Dominica's human rights report, and he was grilled on especially on issues having to deal with the elections and the fact that they were refusing to do the reform. So I think I would say the first recourse is when they are blocking you from getting legal status to become an NGO in Dominica, you write to the Prime Minister and ask for a meeting. You write to that respective Minister of National Security and ask for a meeting. Now they will try to delay it, but what you do, you publish it online. And that brings me to a very important tool that we have today that we didn't have in the 80s and the 90s, and that is social media. Of course, this program is on social media. We didn't have that access before. in this era of social media and big data, we're likely to spur groups to take action, to campaign on issues like civil liberties, better education systems, and issues of climate change. And I know in Dominica, the government has talked a lot about climate resilience, which I support. But I always say that if the society is not mobilized and you don't get so partisan, then climate resilience is not going to happen. So there must be a space to allow these voluntary organizations and NGOs to play their role without that strict partisan behavior of the state. Thanks to technology, more than ever before, we're able to inform governments about what we think they're doing wrong, and with their policies, and then what ought to be done. We now have that tool of social media, and I think we have to use it far more than we realize.
All right, indeed, folks, it is already 7 o'clock. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take a little break. After that break, we're going to go to the live feed. There are a number of persons commenting there, and then we'll get back to Crispin for his, sort of closing down comments on that segment of the program. Let's take a break at this time. This one we're doing from Nasiu, entitled Unite.
We've got to unite. We've got to unite. Come on, people, say we've got to unite. Brother and sister, say we've got to unite. Why can't we unite? Lord, I wanna know now. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite? Lord, why can't we unite? Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite? Lord, united we stand, so divided we fall. We must unite, double these walls, Lord. 400 years, divided too long. We must unite, if we must be strong. Whoa, 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 whoa. Every time I look around, I see my people suffer. Lord.
Our brother Nasio Fontaine doing a very important number, asking us to unite in Dominica. At least that is one way the NGOs, the topic under scrutiny tonight, can survive indeed, is by us uniting.
Get me unite, Lord. Why can't we unite? Black and white. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite?
And trust me, that is the all-important question. Why? Just why are we not more united people in Dominica? Folks, let's get back to the normal live feed at this time. Let me now go to the board and take some comments here. Crispin, take note. Alvin, take note of some of the comments that have been made here so that you guys could respond. Margot Larock, sorry, Margot, pardon. I'm giving you a surname, Margot. Margot Larock writes here, NGOs have become enemies of the state, advocating for proper practices and against the destruction of our rivers, deforestation, and quarrying on protected areas is like pulling teeth in the country. She ends by saying, ask WAVE. I guess that is an NGO that is basically struggling to survive in Dominica, to do things for on behalf of Dominicans. Dave Bertrand writes, unless Dominicans are prepared to take action to stop this regime, we better start saying goodbye to our lovely country, Dominica. Ezra Winston writes, Brother Alvin, what you're saying, it is good. These things will be ensured in a democratic country, in a democratic country. but Dominica is in a dictatorship, Brother Ezra Winston writes. Even you take your concerns outside, nothing will happen. They may just write a letter, but after is back to square one. One more comment, and then I'll ask you guys to respond here. Let me see if I could get another name here. Gail Roy is adding her piece to the conversation, and she's writing very informative and captivating discussion on the history, role, functions, and activities and challenges faced by the NGOs in Dominica. Guys, your comments based on the comments.
Well, Lofty, if I could, on the environmental realm, I think we have gone backwards in many ways, and the attempts by civil society to hold the policymakers to account is not making headway. I'm very familiar with WAVE. I'm actually a board member, and WAVE has been trying its best as the lead environmental organization on the island now. And some of these problems have become intractable. The question of mining and how that's impacting our rivers. And the whole arena of cleanliness and the Dominicans, I think the Dominicans have forgotten that we are the nature island in some respects. It's one thing to say we are the nature island, but there's a responsibility that goes with that, and that is to keep the place immaculately clean. We have problems of garbage disposal, and people are dumping in areas they shouldn't be doing that. And so there's a responsibility that goes with the government, but there's also a responsibility that goes with the common people. And we really need to take a reality check, because if we don't pay attention to the rivers, we will be sorry. Water is the scarcest commodity on the planet. Dominica is blessed with water, but it seems like we're taking it for granted. As far as the second person, who, Mr. Bertrand, talking about unless Dominicans take action, the reality is that we're extremely polarized country. And because of that, it really is at the detriment of taking action, because only a few people want to take action, but a substantial number don't want to take action. So that polarization really militates against having the common good addressed. And I don't really have the answer to that one. I don't know how we get over the polarization, because we've not had a change of government in 20 years. And that has really deepened the polarization. And it's almost like, well, the third person said that we're in a dictatorship, and I wouldn't say we're fully into dictatorship. We are on the pathway to a dictatorship. And if we get there, when we get there, we will be sorry. And that is why the efforts of people to have a fairer process for electoral governance is critical. I think if there was a fair electoral process, maybe we would have had a change of government already. And so that polarization that exists, the political polarization, is really worrying, and I frankly don't know how we address that one.
Can I, Lofty?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah. Well, I seem to have a completely different approach. And what I understand, the observation or the comments made by Dave, I always try to, even given where we are in terms of what's happening in the country, I always tend to have some level of optimism. And I'm saying so against the background of what most of us have seen here, including Crispin, happening in other parts of the world. And I always draw reference on that. I mean, those of us who are old enough to remember, maybe some of those on the chat now may not be as old enough, but remember when Eric Gary rolled Grenada in a manner that people thought would have never ended. He had a mongoose gang. People were being hijacked or taken from their homes, and all kinds of funny things were happening. That was in Grenada several years ago. I mean, when you come to think of it, those of us who really knew what was going on, he had what was called a mongoose gang. Go and research that. And what happened? What happened? I mean, the people at some point said, well, enough is enough. One may not agree. We know of the Bishop Morris and all what came after. We all have a different perspective on it, which is okay. We know the situation in Guyana to a certain extent. We know the situation in Antigua when we had the birds in, and people felt the birds would have never left government. The birds were there till one and Antigua. So the point I'm trying to make is that, Lofty and Crispin and those who are listening, we can't just throw our hands up in the air and say, well, hey, this is what it is. Nothing can be done. We're not able to do something. We have to do a number of things. One, as Crispin rightly said, we have to continue to inform and educate and use the resources at our disposal. I mean, do you know the impact and the effect social media has? I mean, Donald Trump used Twitter during his election to convey his point of view to the American people, and people fell for it. Some people fell for it. You know the effect of social media? So we got to use that. We got to engage our youth more. We got to listen to them more, not talk to them. We need to listen to them, sit down on the block and hear them. Don't come and tell them, well, hey, you must do X, Y, and Z. Listen to them. They can tell you a lot. I mean, look at this young man who became the Calypso King. I listened to him on Friday with Wadix, 23 years old. Listen to his lyrics of his 2 songs. He's watching and checking what's going on, and he's singing about it in song, in Calypso. So I think we can do some work. We have to engage. We have to use the resource before us. And I think if we can do that, we can bring about a certain change. Is it going to be painful? Yes. Is it going to be easy? No. But I think we can achieve.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, Alvin. Crispin, I know you are basically, given to us here an hour of your time, so that hour basically is up. I don't know if we can indulge your patience, that is, to stay a bit longer first, but at least we want to respect the hour that you basically said you'd give to us in that regard.
Yeah, I'm willing. Because that second part of your program is also very connected and interesting. I'm willing to stay and.
Okay, thanks. All right, thank you very much, my brother, for your gesture.
Excellent. I love that.
Let me just get back to the live feed. Angelo Allen is writing here. Hey, Lofty, happy to see Crispin. Good information. Thanks, brother. So Crispin, Angelo Allen is basically beginning up at this time.
Thanks, Angelo.
Yes, indeed. Bernard Allen writes here, we need to get WAVE, that is the NGO we just spoke about that Crispin said is part of, WAVE onto the programs on Civic Vibes so as to inform the people what is happening in our country and how WAVE has been trying to bring about positive action and change. Thank you, Brother Allen, for that comment here. We'll try our very best. Any more comments here based on the feed coming in? Marshall Lawrence is writing, so as pertaining to the electoral process, so many years we've been talking about electoral reform. We've been hearing electoral reform and nothing is happening. What is the solution, guys? Well, brother, we'll be getting into that in just a while. Margot writes here, too much, where are you, Margot? Where are you? Yeah, too much happening at once. I challenge many people to take a drive up to the coast to see which river they can bathe in, still waiting for their responses. Brother Blanchard just tuned in and says he's very late, but he's on. All right, guys, these are the comments that we have to sort of digest on before we veer off into the other conversation for the night.
Yeah, very interesting. I should say to both Bernard, Aline, and Margot that that the challenges before wave are great challenges, and it's because the state has not yet embraced what those challenges are. But we have some real challenges, and if we don't address them quickly, we'll be sorry. And the most important one for me is the pollution of our water. I know that next month the UN is going to have a big conference on water. It's 40%, we're looking at 40% of the world's population will not have clean water by 2030. That's really frightening. And we have clean water, but we're not taking care of it.
Yes, indeed. So brother Gregoire, I want to thank you very much, at least, for coming to speak to the Dominican public about the very important role that NGOs play in any country, more so a country that runs under the banner of being a democratic country. Any final thoughts, final comments on that all-important topic before we move into second gear, sir?
Yeah, well, I just want to say, Lofty, that we've had a good tradition. When I look at the period of independence, 40 plus years of independence, we've had vibrant NGO sector. We've had and the democratic space for the NGOs to work and thrive must continue to grow. This thing of limits that are being put on who can organize to become an NGO should not be there. We have to embrace the efforts of all. And I think that civil society efforts is critical to dealing with what I see as the existential threat of this deep political polarization that has made Dominica. It's almost brought the country to a halt, because so many people are not allowed to participate in the development process. Our major resource as a people is our people with the range of skills, whether they are farmers, whether they are doctors, whether they are lawyers. That range of skills needs to be brought to the fore without regard for who you support politically. And that is what I'm very concerned about. And I see that the voluntary organizations can play a major role if they are allowed to grow and to contribute. And the final thing about the NGOs and the voluntary organizations is that people must support them financially. And that's where the diaspora comes in. I think that the diaspora must support these NGOs because their funding is getting more and more difficult. So I'm just hoping that we won't see laws being passed to restrict the efforts of the voluntary organizations and the non-governmental organizations. They are very important to the future of our country.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very, very much, Crispin.
Can I make a
say something, Alvin?
Comment? Yeah, yes. Let me just briefly make a comment. I too just want to thank Crispin for coming and sharing with us this afternoon on this topic. But let me say two things very briefly. You will be hearing that repeatedly from me. We have to find a way to engage young people, okay? Crispin knows very well, when Crispin started many moons away, He was a young man. Crispin didn't just start it now. Crispin started many, many years ago. I remember Crispin as a young man actively involved in NGOs and other organizations. I mean, we'll spend another 2 programs to discuss that involvement. Myself, many moons away, as a young man, in my 20s, I started. So we need to find a way to engage young people, number 1. Number 2, on the question of the water issue, that's a very, 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 very critical issue that is not receiving enough attention. And all that is linked with the conservations and what is happening to our rivers and our forestation and all of that. Currently, as we speak, water is traded as a commodity on the West Coast in California. Because you know there is serious droughts in the West Coast of America, California to be exact. Water is traded as a commodity. There is a book that came out a year ago or more by a gentleman called Alan N. Williams, Dr. Alan Williams. And the title is Deluge, DEL.UGE. And it speaks about Dominica's water surplus, the Caribbean water crisis, and the global water challenges. Very good book. If those listening can get their hands on that. And that's the other important thing. Each of us can play our little part. Each of us together play our little part. We can move the elephant in the room. And it's not a question of asking, well, who's going to do it when? Each of us play our little part. Come together, play our little part, inform ourselves, give ourselves the information, the knowledge. We can move mountains. It has happened before and it can happen again. So that's my closing comment on that segment of the program.
I do what airport no more. I had murder my hopes. Plus I is a ship we building to take us where we want to go. We hired a famous boat builder by the name of Dick Taylor, and he started laboring way back in 04. And soon we will sail the seas. The entire world will freeze when they see we mountain a Dick Taylor ship all along. So if you want to party and forget all your worries, then all aboard, all aboard. And if you want to know where they're giving out free money, then all aboard, all aboard. We mount in a ship, dictatorship. No more leadership, only dictatorship. We sell the citizenship for the dictatorship. By 2026 is dictatorship. Yeah, and we will sail away from democracy on a dictatorship.
All right, folks, that is your Kaiso King for Dominica 2023, the trilogy, he calls himself. He calls this one a dictatorship.
Dictatorship looking nice, but some workers don't like his designs. Well, all who want to protest can do it. All the policemen on the side. That ship avoid gangs to banks and to radio stations and fuel from Petro-Caribe. That ship have water and light and the fearless captain. We just hope the captain the reset is through again. So if you want to party and forget all your worries, say all aboard, all aboard. There's room for everybody except for them shabba. We say all aboard, all aboard. We mount in a ship, dictatorship. We give out ambassadorship for the dictatorship. Hey, no more scholarship, dictatorship. By 2026 is dictatorship. Boy, and we will sail away from democracy on a dictatorship.
Well, my brother Trilla, we don't in Dominica want to sail away from democracy. And that is why we're having the next topic for engagement here this evening. And that is the important role of any functioning, and that is the key word here, people, any functioning electoral commission in any country. And we're here in Dominica. We have been privy to what our electoral commission has been doing, / the office has been doing for some time now. And so we think, in moving forward, much pressure needs to be brought to bear on the commission in terms of the carrying out their function in the interest of free and fair elections. Brother Thomas, I know that has been your quote-unquote baby. See the smile for some time. Let me let you take the lead on that, brother.
Well, thank you, Lofty. Thank you, Lofty. Yeah, I'm not going to give up on that. Notwithstanding the challenges that we face and the obstacles that are constantly put in our way. I think this matter is sufficiently important enough for us not to not look at it. I mean, we've had all the reports from the OAS, from the Commonwealth, from CARICOM, from CCJ. I mean, you name it. I mean, the shelves are loaded with reports on reform, and we are still where we are today. But let me ask you a question, Lofty, since you are on the ground and you might be better able to answer that. I tried getting some information, but hadn't fully able to validate. Are all the members of the commission, and when I say all the members, I mean the 2 persons nominated by the leader of the opposition, the 2 persons nominated by the prime minister, and the 1 person, the chairman, appointed by the president, have all those persons been sworn in? Have they subscribed and taken their oath of office as commissioners?
Well, Alvin, to answer your questions, what I know for a fact is that you have 4 persons at the commission's level. They were appointed and subsequently took their oath before the president, that is His Excellency Charles Savarin. There's 1 person in the name of Alec Lawrence, I'm being told, up till yesterday, I checked. And based on information reaching me, based on where I checked, then the person could not verify with some level of certainty that Mr. Lawrence took his oath. And so in terms of responding to you based on what I know, then the commission, not as yet in terms of Alec Lawrence. 4, not 5, has been sworn in.
All right. So let me just say, based on what you've just explained, that as we speak now on the 26th of February, we do not have an electoral commission in place. And that's a fact. Okay? Again, Lofty, I think what we have seen over the years is that persons have just taken things for granted. Laws are broken, laws are not complied with, laws are not enforced, requirements of the constitutions are not met. Folks say no constitution, no law will get them to do what they need to do or not do. And everybody have just taken this thing for granted. And it is what it is. And I think we are at that stage now where we no longer apply common sense, protocol, laws, nothing matters. In terms of the Constitution, okay, Section 36 of the Constitution clearly states that the Electoral Commission shall be responsible for the registration of voters and for the purpose of electing representatives and for the conduct of elections of representatives and senators, and shall have such powers and other functions related to such registration and elections as may be prescribed by law. That's Section 38(1). Okay? Section 56 of the Constitution, Part 4, Section 56, 56(3), Section 3, says the Electoral Commission shall consist of A chairman appointed by the president, acting in his own deliberate judgment. B, 2 members appointed by the president, acting in accordance with the advice of the prime minister. And C, 2 members appointed by the president, acting in accordance with the advice of the leader of the opposition. So the Electoral Commission is comprised of 5 members, 2 by the Prime Minister, 2 by the opposition, and 1 by the President in his own discretion. Section 56, Section 56, 5 of the Constitution, Section 56(5) states, subject to the provision of this section, a member of the commission who has been appointed shall vacate his office, and it has subsection A, when the House first meets after. So, in other words, the commission that existed, the 5 members, which is the chairman, the 2 from the Prime Minister, and the 2 from the opposition, when the House met on the 7th of February, that commission no longer existed. They were supposed to vacate the offices. So you no longer have a commission. Now, in order for you to have a new commission, we go back now to section 56, 56(3), which clearly states what comprised the commission. Until each member, the 2 members of the government, of the Prime Minister nominated, the 2 members of the opposition, and the chairman, until each one of those members subscribe and take their oath of office, you do not have a commission. Okay? Now, I know some people might be saying, well, if you have 4 or whatever. No, section 56, 56(10) of the Constitution says that a commission may subject to its rules of procedure, acts notwithstanding a vacancy in its membership, and its proceedings shall not be invalidated by the presence or participation of any person not entitled to be present or to participate at those proceedings. But that only kicks in, Lofty, after you have had a duly constituted commission. So in other words, after the commission has been set up, in keeping with section 56, 3A, B, and C, and you have the commission, because based on section 56(5)(a), 56(5) and 8, they are vacated, they no longer exist. After you have put a commission in place, and say for some reason, one of the members vacate, or they overseas sick, or whatever the case might be, you still have a commission, because that commission has already been constituted. So you cannot say, well, because one member is not there, we no longer have a commission because we don't have 5. You still have the commission.
Yeah.
But before you get to that section 10, you must satisfy first section 56(3), A, B, and C, and also section 56(5) have to kick in.
Yeah.
So it means that they've been vacated. You put in place a new commission, and that new commission now is allowed to do its work as a duly constituted commission.
All right.
Go ahead, Love.
All right, thank you. Just before I bring in Crispin here for his thoughts on the conversation we have in a really important role of the Electoral Commission, and we're talking about zeroing down on Dominica. So basically, Alvin, what I'm getting from you, as per your reading from the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Dominica, I want that to make it crystal clear, is that as is now, we don't have a duly constituted Electoral Commission.
That's correct. No, we do not have.
Okay.
Until all 5 members have subscribed and taken their oath of office by the president, we do not have a duly constituted Electoral
Commission. Okay. Point taken, Alvin. Crispin, Gregoire, are you there still with us? All right.
Yes, I am.
Yes. Okay. Your camera is off?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Based on the conversation we're having now, Crispin, in terms of the very important role that the EC, the Electoral Commission, have to take to bring about or aid in the process of free and fair elections in Dominica. What are some of your initial thoughts on the subject at hand?
Well, we have a new commission that has been constituted, but Alvin is raising a very important point about the constitutionality of the current commission, that all the commissioners have not taken the oath of office, and therefore he has a very legitimate point that really the commission is not fully constituted. That's a rather unfortunate situation. But I should also say that one of my big concerns about the commission is that there should be a reform of that commission. There's no talk about in this discussion with Dennis Byron, there's no talk about that. Unless that commission is reformed so that it will do its work. For example, the commission has conflict of interest. Some of the members have conflict of interest that should not be there. Then you have the ongoing problem of the split in the commission between the opposition representatives and the ruling party representatives, and the chairman, who is not playing an independent role. The Constitution calls for a chairman who will do an independent, he'd act in the best interest of the people of Dominica. That has not been happening for years. And then unless we bring civil society participation in the commission, we're gonna have the same thing go on. This commission is already moribund because I don't see them reaching consensus. Their decisions are always split along party lines, and that's a problem. And so I would like to see the reform of the commission itself. And until we address that, now let me say a few things about that disturb me about the commission, going back to 2009. That was the first year, the first election where we had electoral observers from the OS. That first electoral observer mission from the OS in 2009. They made recommendations. They came back in 2014, they made recommendations. That particular election of 2014, we had recommendations from the OS. And then same thing in 2019, not one recommendation has been implemented by the commission. So why do we have a commission? I am saying that the commission must do its work, and it cannot be hostage to logjam where nothing will happen. So what we've had from 2009 to now, the commission has done nothing. It just continued what it inherited. They have not done anything. And here you have international observers telling you that you have problems with your electoral process, and the commission is yet to act. And the same, some of these commissioners have been there from 2009. So something has to be done.
No,
indeed, I agree with you. Something truly and has to be done in the interest of the people. Yes,
I fully agree with the comments that Crispina just made in terms of the commission and its work. I was just trying to find that section there in the OAS reports, because I think even the more recent report and previous reports that the OAS issued highlighted the what one might call the administrative inefficiency of the commission, and that the fact that the commission itself needs to be more modernized in terms of allowing it to be able to do its works properly. And that would require some level of resources and even staffing, because it is as it is now, it's very limited in that respect. So yeah, I agree with him. But again, let's go back again as I said, section 56, 3A, the chairman. The Electoral Commission shall consist of a chairman appointed by the president, acting in his own deliberate judgment. That's key. And that's why I go back again to always have to refer to our Constitution and our people. You have a president now in office, His Excellency Charles Angelo Savre, who on Monday morning was a minister of government in the Labour Party-led administration. And on Tuesday morning, he was sworn in as the president of Dominica. Where else has that ever happened? Tell me. Maybe Crispin knows of somewhere that I don't know, and I stand corrected. So I stand corrected. Maybe I don't know. Crispin is a fellow that I've traveled all over. He's been an ambassador. So maybe Dominica is not unique. But where else does that happen? And that is where, again, in the Constitution, I don't want to go into it today, but it speaks directly in terms of the qualification and how a person becomes the president. That is an issue that the people could have taken up. We know the conversation and the argument that went up when it came to the appointment of the president then. We know of a particular name that was mentioned, and Dominicans took hell and high water. They said they didn't want that person. And we know what happened. This person eventually was not selected. Then you had other names, and then finally they end up with Mr. Sovereign. But when you have a situation like that in societies like ours, I mean, this is the same president who, while he was minister, publicly called to boycott Brizimat as a minister, as a sitting minister. I mean, he wasn't just an ordinary citizen, you know. He was a sitting minister who called the citizens of Dominica to boycott Brizimat, a business person, simply because he didn't agree with a position taken by the proprietor of Brizimat. And then now, they were turned around and they made him the president. So obviously, whose bidding you think he's going to appoint? Because this chairman of the commission supposed to be person of repute, not anybody currying favor with the political party. And that is why in Sir Byron's defense, if I may say, when he was deliberating with the commission then, there was an indication where at some point they wanted maybe to take a vote on certain issues. So, you know, if a vote would have gone, it would have been 3 against 2. It would be, I guess, the chairman and the 2 of the government side against the 2 of the opposition. And Sir Byron resisted that. And he said he's not going to go in for the vote. He wants rather consensus. So as a result of consensus, the commission was able to agree on, I guess, certain areas that they agree upon. But that is very fundamental. But it takes us back to the whole question of what do we do as a people when we see our Constitution is not being observed in the manner that it should.
Yeah.
And that is why I'm saying in this particular case, people might want to tell us that there's a commission, but there's no commission. Until all 5 members have sworn in, taken their oath of office, we do not have a commission as we speak today.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Alvin, for those fine thoughts here. Gregor, just before I pull you back into the conversation here, they say facts are very stubborn things. And let me now play into you guys hearing and also the people listening as well. Commissioner Chairman, that is Duncan Stu, when he first took his oath of office before Charles Savre, the president, in October of 2020, and his comments soon thereafter to the public, giving the public his undertaking that he will be doing the work of the people. And Gregor, I play that because your comments earlier hinge on the work that the commission should be doing in the interest of the people. Take a listen to the swearing in of this brother, October 2020, and his words thereafter, and we'll have a discussion thereafter.
I, Duncan Stowe,
I, Duncan Stowe,
do swear
do swear
that I will faithfully bear true allegiance to the Commonwealth of Dominica.
that I will faithfully bear true allegiance to the Commonwealth of Dominica.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And then we'll do the oath of office. I, Duncan Stowe,
I, Duncan Stowe,
do swear
do swear
that I will faithfully execute the office
that I will faithfully execute the office
of Chairman of the Electoral Commission
of Chairman of the Electoral Commission
without fear or favor,
without fear or favor,
affection or ill will,
affection or ill will,
and that in the execution of the functions of that office,
and in the execution of the functions of that office,
I will honor, uphold, and preserve
I will honor, uphold, and preserve
the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Dominica.
the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Dominica.
So help me God.
So help me God.
All right, people. These were his words in the swearing-in ceremony, as I said, of October 2020. Here again, his words just after that swearing in.
I am humbled by the confidence reposed in me by His Excellency, the President, to serve as Chairman of the Electoral Commission for this present term. I am aware of the Herculean task ahead. However, I am ready to undertake the challenges that come with this job. I pray God that I do not disappoint the people as I seek to perform my duties to the best of my abilities. I think at this time, I'll take a pause and wait for my feet to be wet as I take up the tasks.
One more time, just one more time, people. One more time.
I am humbled by the confidence reposed in me by His Excellency, the President, to serve as Chairman of the Electoral Commission for this present term. I am aware of the Herculean task ahead. However, I am ready to undertake the challenges that come with this job. I pray God that I do not disappoint the people as I seek to perform my duties to the best of my abilities. I think at this time, I'll take a pause and wait for my feet to be wet as I take up the tasks.
Crispin, your thoughts first based on what you heard.
I think like every chairman before him, he has said exactly what they would normally say. As to whether he has lived up to that, it's difficult for me to say, but where I saw the commission not behaving in the best interest of of Dominica was when that snap election was called in December. The commission clearly was not ready. And the commission knew full well that another election should not have happened until the reforms were done. And the commission failed to put its foot down and behave as an independent body created by the Constitution. That is where I had the problem with the commission. And again, it goes back to that split in the commission between the opposition representatives and the ruling party representatives. It is the chairman to lead. And clearly, Mr. Stowe did not lead, because he could have simply said to the Prime Minister, "Sir, we are not ready to have an election. We've not done what we're supposed to do the reforms." I remember when that our issue of elections reached the OAS. We are the only country in the CARICOM whose electoral problems reached the OAS General Assembly. And it was member states said that Dominica should really do this reform before it had even the 2019 election. And then to have another election happen in 2022, and the commission went along. It's like the commission, because the majority of 3 said, yes, we can have an election. We went on. They could have simply said to the Prime Minister, "Sir, Dominica is not yet ready to have a free and fair election." and they failed there.
Alvin?
Yeah, but you see, Lofty, again, I said earlier on the previous segment that we had, we got a constitution from the British. They don't have one. And when this constitution was developed back then, 40-something years ago when we got independence, and they say, hey, you guys need something to guide the way you go about things. Use that as your guide. It was with the intention that obviously that there would have been honorable men and people with decency, that we would have had a president who is a president for the people, another president representing the interests of a political party, and that whoever the president appoints as chairman would have been a reputable person, an individual who would be able to stand their ground, like Crispin is saying, and represent the interests of the people. But what do we have now? We have people who have their own selfish interests, who are politicized, who have their own political agenda, and we are here where we are today. That's why in some discussions we've had before, folks have raised the question of reviewing and having reform of our constitution. But my response to that is twofold. Yes, I agree we can have some level of reform, but on the other hand, I think there is the constitution is sufficiently designed to allow us to operate at a certain level. I mean, when you take, for example, the fact that the constitution makes provision for a parliamentary secretary, which has never been implemented from start to finish. No one of the government, whether it's Labor, Freedom, we have never implemented it. And as we speak now, there are 17 countries in the region, including Antigua, Jamaica, Barbados, BVI, Grenada, to name a few, that have an ombudsman position in place where the citizens of these countries can take a matter of injustice to the ombudsman for investigation. Look what we had here in Dominica. We had an IPO, an Integrity in Public Office Commission. When the act was passed, it took almost 4 or 5 years, if not more, before any regulations was enacted to give effect to the act. Guess what? The first work of the commission, when there was an inquiry into the assets of the prime minister, what happened? It was a big fiasco. We all know. We don't need to go into it now. But you know what they did? The IPO was made up of 7 members, 7. And you had persons with certain qualifications, like an accountant, an attorney, a couple other things. You know what they did? They went to Parliament and they amended that and they reduced it to 3. 3.
Yeah.
So that's the point I'm making, Lofty. There's so much of those things taking place. And we, the people, just lay back and don't push back.
Yeah.
I think it's time to push back.
Yeah. So Alvin, thanks for the historical context in which you put, the way in which we the people supposed to act. But the question still remains on the table though, based on what's his name? Duncan Stowe's utterances back then, October 2020. And you saw, the Dominican people saw his work as chairman of the Electoral Commission in Dominica. What is your comment on the output that is of Duncan Stowe as chair of a commission that's supposed to be guiding the country into free and fair elections?
Well, he has not held the process. It is clear he has not held the process, because one would have expected as chairman of the commission that he would give certain guidance, and he has not held. And I think that is where the people now, the people of Dominica, must hold his feet to the fire. At the end of the day, he is there representing the people of Dominica under the Constitution. He's not there representing any government or any interest. He is there representing the people. The people must hold his feet to the fire, and they must do what needs to be done. If it's a question of a petition to the president, petitioning that we want him to step down, or apply whatever pressure they need to apply in whatever shape or form, then that's what we need to do, because these people are servants of the people. If you don't want the people to question what you do and how you do it, then don't take those positions. Stay in your private lane and do your private stuff. But once you become a chairman of the commission, you're answerable to the people.
Yeah. Crispin, your thoughts on the same question that I asked Alvin?
Yeah. Well, I would say that the first failure of the chairman was the fact that he was bypassed and his commission by the prime minister to appoint Sir Dennis Byron. That was the job of the commission, not the Prime Minister. I'm sure that the Prime Minister had a discussion with the commission about that, or at least with the chairman. If I was in that role, I would say to the Prime Minister, sir, you cannot get involved in recruiting any consultant for the commission. That is the job of that's a decision the commission must make itself, not you. And so he allowed the Prime Minister to undermine the commission, and that's a failure of his leadership.
True.
Understand? So, and now the commission has to be following the Prime Minister on that question. On the question of electoral matters, the Prime Minister does not have a responsibility there. That responsibility lies with the commission. And it's because the chairman has allowed himself to be used and abused by the administration that he has to do their bidding. So he's in league with the representation of the representatives of the Labour Party on the commission. And that is why I'm saying we have a situation with the commission similar to Jamaica. Jamaica had that exact problem where the commission would not get anything done because of that split. They have the exact representation, 2 members of the opposition, 2 members of the ruling party, and a chairman, and that was not working. So what they did, they did a reform of the commission. They brought in civil society to be in the commission, and the voting that goes on in the commission is the civil society people who make it. And these are experts. These are people, most of them are distinguished jurists who represent the people of Jamaica, and now the commission works.
True.
I think that one of the biggest problems with the commission now is that you have 3 members of the commission who are CBI agents. They get their legitimacy from the ruling party. There's no way that we can get them to make the commission independent. As long as they have conflict of interest, there's just no way that. So we have to remove this conflict of interest.
Yeah. I mean, Crispin is absolutely right. Crispin is right on the money. He's right on the money. He's absolutely right. And if you do, because the only role that the government has in terms of the work of the commission is 2 things. 1, make sure that the commission has a budget that it can operate. So when the budget is presented to Parliament, if the commission needs $500,000, $2 million to do its work, that money is budgeted for. And 2, for purposes of legislation, when those legislations are ready, through the office of the Attorney General and the executive, because the legislation has to come there. The legislation will not come directly from the commission. The commission will have its fingerprint on what goes into it and have comment. But in terms of the formulation and presenting the legislation to Parliament, that has to come from the executive. That's the only 2 roles. But he's absolutely correct. In terms of who you appoint or who says, well, hey, we need some reform, we need some work. That is the work of the commission. And in section 11 of the same section that I referenced, 5611 of the Constitution says, in the exercise of its function under this Constitution, remember I read 48 first and say, who shall be responsible for election. In the exercise of its function under this Constitution, a commission shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person's authority. So it's clear there.
Yeah.
So, but when you have that kind of conflict of interest that Crispin rightly pointed out, then that's what you have happening.
True. All right, folks, it is already 8 o'clock, so we have to start to wind down things here, as it were. I know that is a heated conversation that will continue way into the future until we get the Dominican people, that is, get what we truly deserve in terms of free and fair, or freer and fairer elections in Dominica. But Crispin, I just wanted to comment on one more point here before we sort of, drag back things here to a close. I heard Roosevelt Scarrett said that he basically gave, what's his name, Dr. Kenneth Darrow, that mandate to sort of be that overseer in dealing with groups, dealing with the commission, dealing with whatever, to bring about the electoral modernization that in his mind he keeps speaking about. What are some of your thoughts on that, sir?
Well, it's interesting that he would appoint a former minister to play that role, but to me that's kind of meddling in the work of the commission. I hope he's not Dr. Darrow is not going to undermine the work of the commission. It's unclear to me what his real role is. All I will say though is that I want to see something Alvin mentioned, which is I would like to see an act of parliament that gives the automatic financing to the commission. So the commission doesn't have to go to the Ministry of Finance looking for its money. That automatically there should be a line item in the budget that allocates money to the commission, and when the budget is approved, that money is deposited in the accounts of the commission. Because the commission has been begging for resources and they don't get it on time. I hope we can get past this this constant fight for electoral governance in our country. It's been going on for too long, but we have to be very careful and vigilant right now, because what will become law, that is what we got to pay attention to. Because if we're not vigilant on that question as to what is it will go to parliament to be passed as law, better be in the interests of all the people of Dominica.
Yes, indeed.
Let me just make a last comment on the question you asked about Darrow. Yes. Briefly to say that a lot of times we validate some of those actions or the things that that Prime Minister Scarrett does. So Darrow has absolutely no what you call local standby in this matter. And therefore nobody should go to Darrow, period. The only persons that should consult with him, if at all they wish to, is, I suppose, the Dominica Labour Party and its supporters, but nobody else should consult with Darrow. But if we turn around now and the Prime Minister makes that assertion, and then we ended up going and meet with Darrow, then we're only validating a situation which the Prime Minister, as I said already, has no constitutional authority or jurisdiction to do. He has none when it comes to election. The only thing he has to do as Prime Minister is to make sure the Electoral Commission has its budget, and then when time to present the legislation to Parliament, that the necessary process follows in terms of how legislation goes to Parliament. And I think Crispin is absolutely correct. We need to know what's going in that legislation. We have to keep our ears close and our eyes open to make sure whatever goes in there is in the best interest of the people. That's what we have to do. Constantly be informed, engaged, knowledgeable, and ready to act.
All right, folks, indeed. Let me just take one or two comments from the live feed, and then we're going to ask you guys for your closing comments here. David Joseph is writing here, Duncan Stowe is the deciding vote on the Electoral Commission, and clearly, based on the performance of the commission, he has failed the people of Dominica. His obvious conflict of interest has him siding with the government on issues of interest of the people of Dominica. That is a point being made here. Let me see if we could get one or two more comments here. Bernard Allen writes here, was this not the very last of Duncan that we heard publicly? If wrong, I stand corrected. But a commission which is of such massive importance in the execution of electoral process, and at that time when so much is being done in relation to the review of the relevant laws, should be led by a person of independent thought and solid reputation and strength, able to speak his mind without fear in order to adequately represent the people and the interests. Basically, Bernard is basically saying here, Bernard, what's his name? Duncan Stowe. There's much more that can be desired from a man who holds that massive or serious position as chairman of the commission here. Another person is writing here, Dominica deserves a better, that is Patricia Fontaine says, Dominica deserves better representation than that so many qualified people indeed, we can do much better than that. Dory Drago writes, great enlightening discussion. Thanks, great stuff. Respect to you guys. Guys, based on the conversation we're having, we have to bring it down to wire in just a bit, but do you guys want to comment on anything that you just heard from the comments in the feed?
Well, Lofty, clearly people are very apprehensive of the leadership of Duncan Stowe, and he really has the ball is in his court to prove otherwise to the people of Dominica, because his record is not a good one. And it's not an easy road for a chairman of a commission in a context where the ruling party has dominated the electoral scene for the 20 years. But it will take a chairman who is determined and resolute and wants to do things in the interests of the majority of the country's people. And Mr. Stowe will have to prove himself in that realm.
All right, thank you very much. Brother Thomas, your final comments, sir, as we bring it down to wire here.
Well, again, let me just say thanks to Crispin for staying with us the 2 hours and sharing his thoughts on two very important subject matter, the NGOs, the role of the NGOs in a democracy, and this whole question of electoral reform, and in particular, the role of the Electoral Commission. I know some people feel a little, how should I say, frustrated and maybe even to the point of giving up, that we've been flogging that horse for the last almost 20 years now, and nothing seems to be coming through. But we should not. I think it's important. Democracy has to be every day constantly safeguarded and watched and protected. We can't just say, well, democracy is there, leave it alone and expect it to happen. We see what's happening in a democracy like the United States. They've been older than us, 200 and something years, and we see the challenges that they're having right now. So we're a young democracy, we're a young nation, and then I think we just have to stick at it. We have to be able to hold the Electoral Commission folks to their feet to the fire and have them deliver what they are supposed to deliver for the people. So to all our many folks who have logged in, I could see all of the comments as well. I want to say thank you. And share the information. That's the other thing I always say, Lofty. I mean, even on Civic Vibes, you can go back and listen to the broadcast. Share it. Disseminate the information, because some people don't have it. Well, the lack, how they say it, power or lack of knowledge, the power, something like that. But it's the application of the knowledge. You can have the knowledge, but to what do you do with the knowledge that you have? You have to be able to apply it in your day-to-day and your interaction with one another. So again, thanks for the opportunity. I always look forward to sharing my own piece with you. So thanks again, and have a good week, Crispin. Take care. All the best. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, Alvin, I think your internet service, Alvin, is getting tired now, but it is getting tired at the right time. Crispin, Gregor, your final thoughts, brother?
No, I just want to thank you.
All right.
I just want to thank you for inviting me, and it was really good hearing the input from your viewers and listeners, and two important topics, and I think this is not the last word.
Yes, for sure. Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. Crispin, I want to thank you very much for accepting the invite to be here with us, at least initially, first for the first hour, but you decided to stay on with us based on the gravity and urgency of the situation at hand. Alvin Thomas, thank you very much, as always, my brother, for making yourself available each and every Sunday afternoon when your grandchildren and the extended family gives the approval, right? Thank you very much, my brother, for that.
Yes.
Indeed. Just before I go, though, I want to read an announcement here of an upcoming event that is from the ERC, that is the Electoral Reform Grouping in Dominica that Crispin spoke about earlier, of an activity, a virtual activity that is scheduled for Tuesday coming. And let me just see if I can get to that here before we bring it down to why. It says here, an announcement from the ERC. So Dennis Byron has submitted his report and a draft legislation for electoral reforms for the electoral process in Dominica. The Electoral Commission has been sworn in. Now the people of Dominica must play their part in reviewing the draft of the legislation. It continues here by saying, Dominica, this is the final push for electoral reform. Don't trust the politicians. We have a right to know. The Electoral Commission must fulfill its constitutional responsibility to consult with the people and the population. This is the opportunity for our voices to be heard. Join the Electoral Reform Virtual Rally at, it says here 7 p.m., but I was told that will start at 8 p.m. on Tuesday, 28th February on the Q95 radio. The voice of the people is the voice of God. Get informed and educated on the electoral reform legislation. The Electoral Commission must deliver now, and that now is in capital letters. We have struggled for much too long, and now is the time is right. There is light at the end of the tunnel, but no diabasak, that is the Pato dialect here. For those of you who don't understand, meaning no devil in the bag, no devil in disguise will stop with the people. We must, as we the people, discuss the draft legislation. So again, the time is 8 p.m. on Tuesday, February 2023 on Q95, Facebook, and other social media platforms and all the other radio stations who choose to participate, that is, in the live stream. Be part of the onward march to electoral reform in 2023. That is an announcement of an event, a virtual event that is scheduled for Tuesday at 8 p.m. from the
Lofty,
ERC.
I heard you mentioning that you just read that an election commission has been formed. I heard you read that note in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know, again, you're on the ground. You want to follow through on that with them because, again, Lofty, we have to make sure that we're doing things in conformity with our constitution. So that's something that the ERC might want to look into because
Sure.
I stand corrected, but based on my limited knowledge and what I've read, until the full commission is properly constituted, and that means each member subscribe to an oath in front of the president and swear and take their oath, they are not a commissioner yet. And the commission is made up of 2, 2, and 1, 5. So as we speak now, and maybe next week, if this other guy, and that might be a strategy that the other side, the government side, is doing, to not have a commission in place, to delay things and play for time. If Alec is not available, then put another name. Get somebody else. Is he the only one that can be on the commission? Get another name, have the person sworn in, take their oath, and then you have a commission. But you cannot say that Alec hasn't taken an oath, 4 have taken their oath, and you have a commission. That's a half-baked cake. The cake is not fully baked.
All right, my brother, thank you very much. I will sure look into that matter as it pertains to, as you say, the validity of the Electoral Commission in Dominica and how we move forward. Thank you, guys. Have a great evening indeed.
All right. Take care, man. All the best. Take care, Crispin.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care.
We've got to unite. We've got to unite. Come on, people. Say we've got to unite. Brother and sister, say we've got to unite. Why can't we unite? Lord,
right, Dominica, that is it for us right here on the Civic Vibes for yet another very interesting program this Sunday, the 26th day of February 2023. To all of you still on the live feed, a special good evening to you as well.
Every time I look around,
enjoy what is left of your Sunday evening, all right?
every time I look around, I seem to feel the pain. Why can't we unite?
So on behalf of all of you out there listening, I want to thank in a very big way our special invited guest here, Honorable Crispin. Yes, he's an honorable man indeed. Honorable Crispin Gregoire, former UN ambassador, for being part and parcel of the conversation here this evening. My brother Alvin Thomas, very, very well indeed as well. To the many, many fans out there, always taking time off your Sunday evening, at least 2 hours that is, to be tuned in to that all-important discussion on social media.
We've got to unite, so why can't we unite? Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite?
So on behalf of the Civic Vibes team, I want to bid you guys a special good night. Thank you very much. See you guys next week, same time, same place.
Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite? Oh, harder than the road will open a gap. Forcing on fighting can only keep us apart. God, 400 years, yes, we've fighted too long. We must unite so we can be strong. Whoa, 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 whoa. Every time I look around, I see my people suffer. Every time I look around, I seem to feel the pain. Why can't we unite? Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite? To the place